This is your reality check.
Hi everyone, welcome to The Reality Check, the weekly Canadian show that explores a wide range of controversies and curiosities using science and critical thinking. This is the show for Monday, May 21st, and I'm your host, Darren McKee. With me, as usual, are Adam Gardner.
What's up, Cuboids?
Christina Roach.
Hey everyone.
And producer Pat.
Episode 500.
I feel like we should have some noisemakers or something right now.
You may have noticed, dearest listener, the Roman numeral D in your podcast feed, or more reasonably, the number 500. Mm-hmm. We're quite excited to have 1,000 episodes, as we call it, and it's quite amazing we've been doing it this long, and you're still here, and we're still here.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks.
Indeed.
Thanks for coming out. We thought we'd do a bit of a look back at segments we thought sounded like they weren't true, but it turns out they might have actually been true. And then we're going to have a fantastic game from Pat of spotting the fake. So to kick us off with our pseudo-retrospective of myths and truths, Adam, what was one of the segments you thought, well, this is probably false, but maybe it wasn't?
One segment was from episode 269, 50 Shades of Twilight. Now, back in 2013, when I originally covered the topic, the 50 Shades of Grey novel had been out for a couple of years and had a big significance in popular culture, but the film of the same name was still a couple years away. Now, the dubious-sounding rumor which I tackled was whether or not 50 Shades of Grey was originally Twilight fanfiction. Erica Leonard James, known as E.L. James, wrote a piece of Twilight fanfiction called Masters of the Universe. It was taken down because fans complained it was too racy. But of course, 50 Shades of Grey isn't about vampires, so what gives exactly? Now, the fanfiction was reworked considerably to be the story of Christian and Anna, which we now know as 50 Shades of Grey. A piece of software used to detect plagiarism amongst students was run on both Masters of the Universe and 50 Shades of Grey, and they gave them an 89% similarity. So yes, 50 Shades is derived, as the author admits, from this particular piece of fanfiction. That said, there's little to nothing of Twilight itself that remains in 50 Shades of Grey. There's nothing at all unethical going on here. Many films will start out as a sequel to another movie, but then be retooled to remove any mention of the original film. The original piece of fanfiction was called Masters of the Universe, as I said, and this reminded me of a similar case. The 1980s Masters of the Universe film featuring He-Man had plans for a sequel, which was eventually retooled to be Cyborg, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Oh.
Now, the two movies have nothing to do with each other, and it's mostly costumes and set pieces which were created for the sequel, which were used for Cyborg. So 50 Shades of Grey was indeed originally Twilight fanfiction, but the book and film in their final forms have no resemblance to Twilight, aside from both franchises having mostly female fan bases and being disrespected by men who would be best to just admit that they're simply not for them.
Thanks for the editorializing, Adam.
Yeah.
As for me, one of them was way back in episode 58.
Wow.
Who knew it was even a show back then? On the topic of pink flamingos. So the idea is, flamingos aren't naturally pink, it's just because of what they eat. Like, that can't be true. And it turns out it is true. Flamingos in zoos are white unless they are fed certain carotenoids. This is similar to farm versus wild salmon. And then there's a quote here from that particular episode, I believe from Adam: "We should never cover a myth that's true ever again."
Why would I even say that? It's such nonsense.
It's a great line. So that's one of mine. What about the Toronto crew?
I looked into a long-standing notion in episode 450 that suggests if your tooth gets knocked out, you can save it by putting it in milk and then getting yourself to the dentist or emergency room stat. So I've heard this since I was a kid. I never really questioned it. I just kind of took it at face value. And my guess before I started researching was that I would likely confirm that the whole knocked out tooth and milk thing was totally a myth. So the first thing you have to answer is whether you can even save a tooth, right? If it's knocked out, or in medical terms, avulsed, and the answer is yes. It is possible to reimplant an avulsed tooth. To be clear, we're talking about permanent teeth, not baby teeth. So it really only took a quick sweep of experts in the field to learn that milk is in fact one of the most recommended fluids for temporary knocked out tooth storage. A PubMed article titled Storage Media for Avulsed Teeth looked at 39 papers that were critically reviewed and concluded that apart from solutions that were already designed specifically for storage and culture purposes, Regular pasteurized whole milk is the most frequently recommended and with the best prognosis among other solutions that are likely to be available at the scene of an accident, such as water, saline, or saliva. So for the record, skim milk, condensed milk, or other milk alternatives like soy are not recommended since they don't have the correct pH or fluid balance. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Sounds like something from Big Dairy, quite frankly. And you can't have soy alternatives. No, skim milk's not good enough.
So the first segment I wanted to mention is from episode 217, way back in November 2012, when I was a very fresh face on TRC. I had seen a petition that had over 30,000 signatures, and it read, "For years, the FDA has allowed companies to use castoreum to flavor ice cream and other foods. The problem is that castoreum is a fancy word for a compound made from the crushed anal sacs of beavers."
Yeah.
Fancy is an interesting thing.
It goes on to say that it is kept, quote, totally secret because under FDA rules, companies don't need to include it on their ingredients list. They can just call it, quote, natural flavoring. This seems to have really gotten started when celebrity chef Jamie Oliver talked about it on Late Night with David Letterman. So I was really skeptical about this one, but it turned out to be mostly true. Castoreum is a product of the trapping industry, and it's used in many perfumes, incense, and some cigarettes. It is also a food additive, which falls under the FDA's generally regarded as safe or GRAS category, and is indeed often simply referenced as natural flavoring. The annual food industry consumption in the U.S. is 300 pounds. Now, while it turned out to be true that castoreum is actually the crushed anal sacs of beavers, and that it is in some foods, and that it is simply referenced as natural flavoring on packaging, I also concluded that it was not in many vanilla products, particularly in vanilla ice cream, as both the petition and Jamie Oliver were suggesting.
Interesting.
So two things. You said 300 pounds. Was that per person, Pat?
No, 300 pounds in total across the industry.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Alternatively, now, are you telling me that when someone says this tastes like ass, they may be right
That could be
in a small
correct.
portion of time?
300 pounds across the whole industry, but it's very concentrated, right? So it's in lots of things, and you don't know which things it's in.
That's a delightful one, Pat. Adam, do you have another?
Yeah, back on episode 450, we covered the physics of Zelda featuring Barry Panis. Now, video games are known for having dubious physics. In Super Mario Bros., the small Mario can easily jump some 7 times his full height and is, in many games, able to alter the trajectory of his jump in midair. One needn't look far for these kinds of issues, but there was one particular thing I noticed about Zelda Breath of the Wild, which seemed wrong, but which I needed to ask our resident physics expert Barry Panis about. Now, basically, in this video game, the main character, Link, gets a giant leaf called a Korok leaf. He stands on a raft, and he waves the leaf at a sail, which causes the raft to be propelled forward in the direction the sail is facing and the direction he's blowing the wind. This seemed dubious to me, but I wasn't sure I had the specific words or knowledge to explain why. It seemed like the force generated by waving the leaf would have a similar counterforce against the raft, meaning that he wouldn't move at all or might actually move backwards. Now, as Barry would explain, the mechanism was in fact possible, but perhaps not exactly as shown in the game. Indeed, the easiest way to propel a raft would be to ignore the sail and wave the leaf towards the back of the raft, propelling it in the opposite direction. The moved air would end up going in the opposite direction of the motion of the raft. There was, however, an ideal situation in which what was displayed in the game might actually work. So Link waves the leaf, making the air go towards the sail. The air hitting the sail could then be deflected backwards and then move towards the back of the raft, and this would create a net forward motion for the raft. In the example as shown in the game, with a small, flat sail, it's unlikely that enough of the air would have been captured and redirected, but the idea does make some sense. And as Barry mentioned in the segment, there's even a video of someone doing this online. Basically, there's an electric fan on a wheeled cart. The air is blown into a sail of types, which is sort of rounded out pizza pan, and it deflects the air in such a way that it is reflected into the opposite direction that the fan is pointing, and the cart moves in the direction of the air leaving the fan as that same air is turned around. Of course, this is an inefficient way of doing this, as simply removing the sail makes the whole thing move much faster in the opposite direction. So in this case, I wanted to cover a topic which I was so sure was nonsense, and I'm glad I didn't cover it myself, as I would have been totally wrong, and thanks to Barry Panis for clearing that one up for me.
Oh, very cool.
Barry's awesome.
Well said. On a slightly similar physicsy note, my next one is from episode 158, which has to do with a gravitational anomaly in Hudson's Bay. When I read about this in Canada, Hudson's Bay, there's a gravitational anomaly, supposedly. That doesn't sound true, but apparently it is. Now, in this sense, it's important to note the anomaly is in reference to the surrounding environment in terms of a comparison, not a true gravitational anomaly like no one has any idea how gravity works.
Yeah.
The issue is that there's about a 1 in 25,000 difference compared to the surrounding area in terms of the difference of gravity in this particular part of Hudson's Bay. And there's been a debate about why this has been raging for decades. And there's two main theories, each of which seems to explain part of the phenomenon. One is magma. So convection currents drag plates down, which then decreases the mass in that area, which would then have a corresponding decrease in gravity. So gravity is still linked to mass. It's not truly anomalous beyond that.
G is not changed.
Correct. F equals gmm over r squared. The other is due to an ice age about 20,000 years ago and the expansion of ice as it happened. This was in the mantle, and rocks and crusts basically kind of expanded. So if you imagine ice increasing in a particular space and then the ice melting, now there's a bit of a hole. And then the mantle and crust kind of eventually moves back to fill in that hole, but the rate at which the rock and mantle was moving was slower than the melting of the ice. Thus, there's a space, a bit of a pocket, so to speak. And because there's more air, there's less mass, which means there's less gravity. And that's just how it is, and that's the truth. And it's just very interesting to think if someone's like, oh, it's a gravitational anomaly. Like, yeah, okay, whatever, buddy. Turns out it's true.
Now, this also makes me wonder how many other minor gravitational anomalies there must be all over the Earth because of slightly inconsistent density levels and things like that people just don't notice.
In that segment, which you can find at trcpodcast.com, searching episode 158, I do reference a National Geographic gravity map of the Earth, which I haven't checked if link still works, but we'll hope it does.
Yeah.
Toronto.
Okay, well, I've got to go with the sharks versus vending machines in episode 471. That one was a lot of fun because I really had to dig deep into the stats. And the genesis was a clickbaity headline suggesting that humans are more likely to be killed by a vending machine than a shark. And I honestly thought it sounded so ridiculous that it was probably true. So just to be clear, we're not talking about the nutritional value of what you buy from the vending machine slowly killing you over time. We're talking about vending machine tipping over and literally killing you. Sanjay Manahan wrote an article on Freakonomics blog called How Are Sharks Less Dangerous Than Vending Machines? An Exercise in Conditional Risk. He relays a story about being at the New England Aquarium with his daughters, and they're checking out the shark tank when a staff member states that vending machines are twice as likely to kill you as a shark. Now, as Mahajan says, my number sense complained that sharks simply must be more dangerous than vending machines. Now, it's true if you look at the stats, the yearly risk in the U.S. of dying from a shark attack is roughly 1 in 250 million, while in contrast, the yearly risk of dying from a vending machine accident is 1 in 112 million. So this implies a vending machine is roughly twice as lethal as a shark. Okay, so a quick footnote on this guy. You do have to take into consideration that the statistics are averaged over everyone in the States, and most Americans have zero chance of being killed by a shark at any given moment, depending on whether they're near the ocean or live near the ocean. And the comparison of the risk to a vending machine, it ignores relevant information like whether one is actually swimming anywhere near a shark. So it's important to note as well that since vending machine safety warnings and anti-tipping mechanisms have been implemented, the original 1995 report by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, this was the report that was used to support these claims of just over 2 deaths per year in America from vending machines. It could have easily declined since then. So a little reasoning goes a long way here.
That's a good phrase for everything. And remember my recent segment about dogs killing more people than sharks, and the snake bites as well.
It also makes us think of accidents in a different way. People think of accidents as being unpreventable, but when you can take safety measures to reduce the likelihood of an accident, you kind of have to look at it differently. Even car accidents, for example, can be made to be much safer or can be prevented.
I was also thinking there might be some edge cases where, say, there's a fish vending machine, you happen to buy some shark, and then you choke on it. Then what? Is it the shark? Is it the vending machine? Do you double count? Oh,
yeah.
So back in 2014, I noticed that one of my earlobes had a crease on it. I assumed that it was just because I was sleeping away that was making the crease happen, but I checked into it a bit and found something pretty interesting. So I did a segment on episode 303 about it. It turns out that a diagonal earlobe crease, it even has an acronym, an ELC, is also known as Frank's sign, named after Dr. Sanders T. Frank. Dr. Frank was the lead author on a 1973 study which reported that a diagonal earlobe crease was a potential indicator of coronary artery disease.
Oh, boy.
I talked about a bunch of studies on this, and some of it was conflicting, but there are several studies that seem to confirm it. And if true, no one really knows why. There is one leading theory, though, that the degeneration of the elastic tissue around the small blood vessels that carry blood to the earlobes produces the earlobe crease, and that this could indicate similar changes in blood vessels around the heart. I concluded that there was enough evidence suggesting a connection between the creases and heart disease that it likely warranted a discussion with your doctor if you have them, especially if you're under 40 years of age.
So did you notice the crease and say, oh, what is this? Tippity-tappity-tappity-tap, Google?
That is exactly how that segment happened. Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
On a slightly related note of biological cues indicating other things, Adam, do you have another one?
Yeah, in episode 469, I covered can a computer program tell if someone's gay? So at the time, a news story had made headlines and caused concern by claiming that a computer algorithm might be able to tell if someone was gay, and I wasn't sure what to believe, which prompted me to investigate. And ultimately, the claim, as the authors of the study were actually making it, was pretty much valid. So no, a computer algorithm cannot determine with 100% accuracy if a person is gay, but this deep neural network had quite a high success rate. The study compared facial features of gay and heterosexual men and women to see if this deep neural network could tell the difference. Now, the scientific idea which would suggest this might be possible is prenatal hormone theory, which predicts that hormone levels would both influence sexual preference and facial appearance. I'd previously done a segment on gaydar talking about people being able to use physical cues to determine one's sexual orientation. These were usually better than chance. Not much better than chance, sort of in the 55 to 65% range, which isn't really worth much at all. The research was thorough. It studied photos of over 35,000 gay and heterosexual men and women. They used equal numbers of gay and heterosexual people for it. Using a single image, the software was able to distinguish gay and heterosexual men in 81% of cases and women in 71% of cases. But by using 5 images of a person, that rate went up to 91% for men and 83% for women.
Sheesh.
The software was also able to isolate which features were more prominent in gay versus heterosexual men and women. And gay men had narrower jaws, longer noses, larger foreheads than heterosexual men, and lesbians had larger jaws and smaller foreheads than heterosexual women. Now, this is on average. It's not going to be an absolute thing in every case. So it's not perfect. It only used white participants from the US, and no transgender or bisexual individuals were included in the study. So a lot of flaws there, but these were practical considerations which just made their evaluations simpler. So the model was decent at predicting sexual orientation, but since it isn't 100% accurate, it can't be considered to be very useful, as it would have a lot of false positives and negatives. One would also wonder what the purpose even is, and there was a lot of controversy at the time. There are many horrible usages one can imagine, but not many good ones. Ultimately, though, from a purely scientific and academic point of view, this research supports the prenatal hormone theory of sexual orientation, and this kind of knowledge can not only be of scientific interest, but can be used to counter unscientific claims, such as that homosexuality is a choice and that conversion therapy has scientific validity.
I think that the very idea of something being 100% accurate is probably problematic, especially if you think sexual orientation falls along a continuum. And I would say some individuals might feel differently depending when you ask them, and they might not even know themselves. So I guess it's stated sexual orientation, but even that, what does that mean? Anyway, I think it's an important nuance to highlight. As for me, imagine someone says, you know, there's a big ice sheet in Greenland, and when that ice sheet melts, releasing all this water, sea levels near Greenland will go down. Like, well, where's the water going? Melting of Greenland ice sheet and water sea levels, episode 388. So apparently the Greenland ice sheet is releasing 8,300 tons per second each day of ice into water into the surrounding water.
Wow.
The main concept here is that Greenland is so massive, it actually pulls water towards it through gravity. And as it gets smaller, it has less gravitational pull. So as it's melting, it's getting smaller, having less mass, having less gravitational pull. And then the water which was pulled towards it tends to not flow towards it as much and actually flows towards the equator.
Yeah.
The consequence of this is that, yes, local sea levels off the coast of Greenland will actually decrease the more the Greenland ice sheet melts.
Bad for everyone else, though.
Right. And but why I thought this was so interesting, aside from it sounding preposterous, is that it really makes you rethink, like, well, how do I envision the world, and how does water move around the world?
Oh, yeah.
The other thing that I mentioned during that segment is in Antarctica, maybe in the West Antarctic ice sheet. If that sheet melts, it's something like there'd be a 16-foot increase in global sea levels.
Wow.
But a 300-foot decrease in the local sea levels right off the coast.
Yeah.
And most models that take this stuff into account don't usually mention gravity. And in this one, I actually mentioned episode 158, which amused me, which I didn't realize until I chose 158 first.
Oh, that's cool.
Apparently, gravity's where it's at for me.
Okay, so this one I came across before a trip to Paris last year, and I covered it in episode 442. The claim: it is illegal to take photographs of the Eiffel Tower at night without explicit permission. This sounded like absolute BS to me, especially considering how many tourist photos you find online and the fact that it's one of the most iconic and photographed landmarks.
Yeah.
So I came across the curiosity on Snopes, and lo and behold, it's technically true. Distributing photographs of the night-lit Eiffel Tower is a violation of an artist's copyright. What? Okay, so most countries abide by something called freedom of panorama, and according to the European Union's 2001 copyright directive, people can take photos of architectural works situated in public places and publish or distribute them in most European countries without first asking for permission. But France opted out of this directive as it wasn't mandatory. So in other words, they said no. Although the Eiffel Tower was constructed in 1889 and is considered to be in the public domain, in 1985 they added a light show, which is considered to be an artistic display and therefore copyright protected. So snapping nighttime images of the Eiffel Tower is a violation of the artist's copyright under French law because that lighting is considered to be artistic work separate from the tower.
Mon Dieu.
Mon Dieu. There's actually an international copyright treaty, the Berne Convention, which provides protection for literary and artistic works. So if you want to publish an image of a night-lit Eiffel Tower to social media, you are technically supposed to get permission from the Eiffel Tower's operating company. Now, obviously, the concern is people are using these photos for financial gain or commercial use without paying licensing fees. So even though the claim that it's illegal to take photographs of the Eiffel Tower at night without explicit permission is actually true, the reality check is this would be near impossible to enforce. And unless you're profiting by uploading or publishing the photos, you really don't have much to worry about.
So on episode 429, I did a segment on whether there are more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way galaxy.
I remember this one.
I love this one.
I think it surprised everyone, including me. I saw this via an image macro from the website unbelievableFactsBlog.com. When I looked into that site, to my surprise, each image included a source. Now, I only looked at a few of the images, but the sources were actually pretty good. Time Magazine, PBS, a decently written Wikipedia article, and this was also the case with the image claiming more trees on Earth than stars in the Milky Way. The source was the science journal Nature.
I remember the numbers. Is it going to be a quiz?
The quick overview of that segment was that a study by scientists in 15 countries on tree density at a global scale came up with an estimate for the number of trees on Earth, and that number is, Darren?
3.2 trillion.
Correct.
Wow.
On the other side of the equation, estimates for the number of stars in the galaxy vary quite a bit, but most estimates put the number of stars in the Milky Way between, Darren?
2 and 400 billion solar masses.
100 billion and 400 billion. Very close.
Pretty good.
So using those estimates, the statement on the image is true. There are more trees on Earth than stars in our galaxy.
That's crazy pants.
Yes, possibly 8 times or a lot more times.
Yeah.
And so ends the first part of our show, where we looked back at segments we thought were probably not going to be true, and it turns out they were. And in case you're wondering why we did this, is that on the show we've tried to cultivate a good critical thinking lens by which to view the world, but something we've also tried to promote is really thinking things through and having an open mind, and not so open that your brain falls out. It's not good to be a knee-jerk skeptic and just say no, no, no to everything, but really say, why is that? What does that mean? Is there good evidence to support that hypothesis? And then you evaluate the claims on that merit.
And I think everyone's had a lot of fun with these segments that occasionally you look at it and you think, oh, man, this can't possibly be true.
Yeah.
And then as you look into it, it actually is true, and it still makes it on the show.
Right. And it should be a bit of we'll say a cognitive wake-up call if you're the person who's like, that's not true, and say you're right 90% of the time. It's tempting to just like, well, look, I got this. I got this. Because we've done the show long enough that usually I say, yeah, I'm more interesting or annoying at dinner parties because we've done like 1,500 topics, and the answer is almost always, that's not true. So whenever I hear anyone say almost anything, I'm like, that's not true. And I'm usually right. But it doesn't mean you're always going to be right. Well, further exploring the domains of truth and falsity, we now turn to Pat for a game of Spot the Fake.
Here we go with another edition of everyone's favorite mostly guessing game, Name That. Today, at Darren's request, we play Name That, Spot the Fake.
Yay.
Yay.
We have 5 questions, no tiebreaker today. If we're tied after 5 questions, we'll end that way. For each question, I will give you 4 so-called facts and ask you to spot the fake. All of today's fake facts come from an article by science educator Tom Adams called 101 Fake Facts That You're Doomed to Remember as True.
Oh, man.
Everything else is true. I've randomly determined our starting order and we'll rotate. Question number 1. Adam, you're up first. Spot the fake. A, the longest interval between 2 twins being born is 87 days.
Jeez.
B, in 1923, a jockey won a race at Belmont Park despite being dead. C, researchers believe that everyone has a unique tongue print and that they can be used as a tool in biometrics and forensics. Or D, the first sunglasses were made of animal skin, scraped so thin that it became transparent.
They all sound true. I'm going to go with the sunglasses one being the fake. I feel like there's got to be an easier way.
Adam says D. Next is Christina.
I'm going to go with C.
Christina says tongue print. And lastly, Darren.
Well, I can't help but support both my co-hosts. I was leaning towards both C or D. The sunglasses one does seem... I'll pick C. Last minute, flip a coin.
Darren agrees with Christina. 2 twins were born 87 days apart. Frank Hayes did die of a heart attack during a steeplechase, but his body remained in the saddle, and he won.
Oh, my gosh.
Researchers are working on using tongue prints for biometrics and forensics. The first sunglasses being animal skin is made up.
Oh,
so that one
I
goes
just
to
thought
Adam.
it was so ridiculous that one had to be true.
Question number 2. Christina, spot the fake. A, according to the International Federation of Poker, socks don't count as an item of clothing in strip poker. B, it costs the U.S. Mint almost twice as much to mint each penny and nickel as the coins are actually worth. C, some fruit flies are genetically resistant to getting drunk, but only if they have an inactive version of a gene scientists have named happy hour.
Oh, man.
Or D, in 1567, the man said to have the longest beard in the world died after he tripped over it running away from a fire.
I'm going to say B.
Christina says B, it cost the U.S. Mint almost twice as much to mint pennies and nickels. Next is Darren.
Well, now, I do appreciate the detail of the date of 1597, or whatever it was in D. As for the strip poker thing, I think there should be a qualification, because I assume there's a difference between socks on your feet and socks stuffed somewhere else.
Right.
The stuffing shouldn't count. That seems just fair.
It's going to be the last thing we
I
come out.
do think the penny thing is probably true, so why not? An old man tripping on his own facial hair from a fire.
Darren says the guy tripping over his own beard. And lastly, Adam.
The only one of these that I'd heard is the penny one. I'd heard it costs 2.2 cents worth of copper to make a penny. But I'm going to say A. Why wouldn't a sock count in strip poker? Everything counts. It's such nonsense.
Adam says A. Taxpayers did lose over $100 million in 2013 just through pennies and nickels being made. Some fruit flies are resistant to getting drunk, prompting researchers to work on drugs that mimic the effect. Hans Steininger did trip over his 1.4 meter or 4.5 foot beard, leading to his death. The strip poker fact is a myth.
Adam's in the lead.
You know, I totally give it to Adam, but I should have just listened to how I've interpreted the question better. Because I thought, like, well, that's obviously not true, and I just didn't think about it clearly. So that's my own failure for not listening and paying attention to the game that I requested.
Yeah, the second I said the coin thing, too, I remembered, I even think we did something on the show where something was brought up about the penny
Melting
being
coins.
Yeah.
We talked about defacing money being illegal, and I might have mentioned at that point that you could get more value out of melting coins.
Question number 3. Darren, you're up. Spot the fake. The Katzenclavier was a 17th century musical instrument. It was a row of caged cats with different voice pitches, which was played by a keyboardist, causing them pain.
Oh, I was going to laughing until the pain part.
Right. B. One of the rings of Saturn is almost pure silver dust. C. The Romans used urine to clean and whiten their teeth. Or D. The largest snowflake ever recorded reportedly measured 15 inches or 38 centimeters across and 8 inches or 20 centimeters thick.
Once again, this is a great game. Which one of those is fake? Well, since it's in the media, I'm going to pick the snowflake.
Darren picks D, the largest snowflake. Next is Adam.
They have these CDs or albums you can get around Christmas time. I think it's called like Kitten Bells or something like that. My understanding is that they're done through editing. And I've seen people do the like trying to get the cat to make a different noise thing. I just think that wouldn't work because I don't think you would be able to get the individual cats to make a consistent sound every time you make them meow. And I've tried to put 2 cats in a pet carrier. I don't see how that could work. So I'm going to say A is false.
So Adam says A, the Katzenclavier doesn't exist. And lastly, Christina.
That sounds like a Monty Python sketch, that first one. I think I'm going to go with A.
Christina agrees with Adam about the Katzenclavier. And the winner of this question is Pat.
Oh, wow.
Someone did build the cat's clavier, or cat piano, and it's horrifying. Romans did use urine to whiten their teeth, which apparently actually works.
I figured that one might be true.
The largest snowflake ever recorded was 15 inches or 38 centimeters across. One of the rings of Saturn is not pure silver dust. That's fake.
Sneaky devil.
Question number 4. Adam, spot the fake. A furlong was originally defined as the distance a mule can run in 2 minutes. B, a group of flamingos is called a flamboyance.
I want that one to be true.
C, in Sweden, there is a competition called Kaninhoppning, which is similar to horse show jumping, but with rabbits. Or D, 2 of the 3 members of ZZ Top are well known for their long beards. The drummer, who doesn't have a beard, is Frank Beard.
I think B, I don't believe a group of flamingos could really be called a flamboyant.
Next is Christina.
As much as I want it to be true, I'm with Adam. I think I'm going to go with B.
Christina agrees about the flamingos, and last is Darren.
Well, I think I have to pick something different just for the whole gamifying part of it all. Oh, that flamingo one is very appealing. I'll just pick the Swedish one, even though it's entirely plausible that exists.
So Darren says that rabbit jumping doesn't exist. And the winner of this question, once again, is Pat.
Furlong?
Frank Beard is the drummer for ZZ Top. Rabbit jumping is a thing in Sweden. A group of flamingos is called a flamboyance.
No.
A furlong was originally defined as the length of a furrow in 1 acre of plowed field. Going into the last question, we already have a winner, but we'll do question 5 anyways. Christina, spot the fake.
Okay.
A pinky swear or pinky promise originally meant that the person who breaks the promise must cut off their pinky finger.
I can see that.
B, a Queens, New York man spent nearly 5 months in prison unaware that his bail had been set at $2.
Oh, my God.
C, X-rays cannot pass through Velcro. Or D, it would take 76 8-hour workdays to actually read every online privacy policy the average person agrees to each year?
I'm going to say that C is the answer.
Christina says X-rays cannot pass through Velcro.
That one's fake.
Next is Darren.
I too want to choose the Velcro one, but I won't. I'll choose B.
Darren says a Queens, New York man spent nearly 5 months in prison unaware his bail had been set at $2. Lastly is Adam.
I'm going to say D is the fake. I think it would take an extremely long time to read all of the things I agree to in a year, but I don't think it'd be quite that long.
So Christina is correct, but Adam is still your winner. A man did spend 5 months in Rikers Island cell, unaware his bail was set at only $2. A pinky swear did mean you were supposed to chop off your pinky finger if you gave away the secret. It would take 76 working days for you to actually read every online privacy policy you agree to. X-rays not being able to go through Velcro, well, that's made up. So congratulations, Adam.
Congratulations, Adam.
Thank you.
It was about time for a win, I guess.
It only took 500 episodes.
Nothing like passive-aggressive congratulations from your co-host. Thanks again for another delightful game, Pat. And since this is episode 500, I think it's a good time to pause and express our gratitude to all the people who've joined us over the years. Thanks so much to all the different guests who've shared their time and their brilliance with us. And thank you so much to the listeners. It's been absolutely fantastic, like 10 years almost of recording a podcast. Mm-hmm. And we hope you've been entertained. We hope we've made a difference in how you think about the world. And we certainly appreciate all the mail we get from you. So we hope you join us for another 500. We'll have another one of these in 2028 when the robots come.
Yeah, 500 is a lot of episodes to do. I haven't been on all of them, but I was on episode 1, just to put that out there. Yeah, we probably wouldn't do this without the fans. You know, there's still some value to doing it, even if no one listens, but I probably wouldn't have done 500 of them. So thank you to everybody.
Although I haven't been around as long as you guys have, I came on board on episode 324 after Elon left, which was 3 years ago. I know I committed to a year. I promise you guys I'll just commit to a year and see how it goes, and here I am, and I love doing the show with you guys every week. I've learned so much stuff, and even cooler, I've been able to relay that to other people and to friends, and it's just always so great when people write in. So thank you guys. Congrats on 500 shows.
I'll just take a moment to give a shout out to the other people who have been part of the show. Elon Dubrovsky, who was a part of the show for a long time. John Abrams, who was very much a part of starting this. Xander Miller, who was one of the early hosts. And Sebastian Lebel, who was also one of the early hosts. I think we have to share that with them. It's a labor of love, and I don't think we'd do it if people weren't listening, so thank you.
So give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts.
Couldn't resist. And I'll just quickly say something I'm sure we all feel is that thank you to each other, because it's a lot of work day in, day out, and especially to Pat. Without his seamstress styles of editing, we truly wouldn't be able to produce the quality that we do.
Absolutely.
Until next time, think better to act better.
Peace out, Cuboids.
Stay classy, not smart-assy.
We'll talk to you next week, everyone.
For show notes or to discuss this episode, visit our Facebook page and website at trcpodcast.com. For general inquiries or to send a topic or parody suggestion, email info@trcpodcast.com. Help support the show by leaving a review on iTunes and liking us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter @TRC_podcast.